we hear about the Pfizer vaccine, we're hearing about Johnson and Johnson. Dr. Bird touched on it. We hear a lot about this mRNA, and most of us didn't go to medical school, and most of us don't really understand the science of that and really understand what that is. I would assume, but I'm wondering if you can take some time and just compare and contrast the Moderna, the Pfizer, the Johnson and Johnson vaccines, and let us know. Dr. Bird touched on it a little bit, but let us know what mRNA is. Is that dangerous? What does that do? So compare and contrast Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson and Johnson. Let us know a little bit about mRNA.
Thanks, Dr. Teamer. In order to compare and contrast the various vaccines that are on the market currently, we need to take a look at what a vaccine simply involves. A vaccine is simply a treatment that is given to a patient so that their own bodily immune system can build up memory cells that will destroy that pathogen if it's ever encountered again in the future. It's not a drug. It's not a chemical that goes into your body and stays there for a long period of time and causes harm in the future. That is not what this is. It amplifies your own bodily defense system. It produces your own memory cells that allow you to destroy a pathogen in the future. The two vaccines that you mentioned, the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccine, are both mRNA vaccines, messenger ribonucleic acid, mRNA. mRNA vaccines have been around since the early 2000s. This is not new technology. It's been used to do many other things before. Dr. Turner mentioned earlier the many benefits of the mRNA vaccine, in that it can be produced with no parts of the actual virus itself. It is synthetically produced. It's simply using a synthetic production of mRNA to provide a blueprint for the production of the spike protein that is actually on the actual virus. It is not the virus. You're not producing the virus in your body. We figured out how to import that mRNA into cells by coating it with a lipid, and then it enters into your cell. This is what's present in the actual vaccine itself, the mRNA message that is for the spike protein. Once it enters the cell, the mRNA, or this blueprint, is then used by your own body's protein producing factory to produce a spike protein that is actually present on the COVID-19 virus. That is then displayed on that cell. The little mRNA that is produced is so volatile that it gets destroyed right away. It doesn't linger around. That is why it has to be kept at such extremely low temperatures, just to preserve it long enough to even get it in our bodies. So this is nothing that's going to be in you forever. It goes away soon after it's actually used by your cells to produce this spike protein. Your body then responds to this little spike protein that is presented on the surface of it, and your body destroys it. In the process of destroying it, it produces these memory cells. Those memory or immune cells then linger around in your body, so that if you ever come in contact with this spike protein or the spike protein attached to the total virus, you will then destroy it. That's the basis of immunity related to the mRNA vaccine. The other vaccine that people will hear about is the Johnson and Johnson vaccine that's out there. And there are other trials going on to approve it, but it hasn't been approved for use in the United States yet. That's a viral vector vaccine. Even that vaccine doesn't involve the coronavirus. It is a harmless adenovirus that we have implanted COVID-19 spike protein DNA into that virus, which is harmless. That harmless virus then enters into the cells in your arm, enters into the cell, causes the production of that same blueprint mRNA that we talked about. It is then used by your cells to make this spike protein, goes through the same process as the mRNA vaccines to produce and display that spike protein. Your own body's defenses then create cells to destroy that actual spike protein or whatever it's attached to, giving you full immunity to the actual virus. It's a, when I'm clearly overly simplifying the whole process, but it is nothing that harms an individual. This is not new technology. This has been around for many years. It's been used for many other disease processes. They didn't invent this last February when they found the first case of coronavirus in the United States. These are techniques that have been around for a long time. As I mentioned, the mRNA process was really perfected, so to speak, in the early 2000s. The viral vector vaccine technique has been around since the 1970s. These are processes that have been present in our healthcare system for a long time.
Well, that's big. Like that's huge, and I appreciate your explanation of that. The idea, number one, and you corroborated what Dr. Bird said, and I love, and I hope everyone's hearing the amazing congruency to which they're speaking. And they didn't necessarily get together and say, you know, what are you going to say on this and what are you going to say on that? That's not how this happened. One, this is not a live virus that's being injected. Okay, I've heard a number of doctors say that here tonight. It's not the live virus, because that's a kind of a big thing. People want to know, am I getting the actual virus? So we've had a number of people say no tonight. The mRNA, though we might not quite understand it, and at least I should just probably talk about myself, even though I don't really quite understand it. I heard you say that this is not new technology. Okay, this has been around. It's been around for a very, very long time. And so though these, when we hear it on the news, though it sounds new to us, that doesn't mean that it is new. It's been around for a very, very long time. And then finally, you said that this vaccine, I want to make sure I got this right, okay? You said that the vaccine is not a drug, it's not a chemical. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
It's not a drug or chemical that stays in your body for long periods of time.
Gotcha.
It's synthetic material that we have made, man-made mRNA. It
Gotcha.
is a blueprint for production of a protein.
Okay. Okay.
That blueprint is very volatile, gets into your cell. It then causes you to make this protein. As soon as it does its job of instructing that code, it is destroyed. It is broken down by the cellular material that we all have. It is nothing that's going to hang around and cause cancer later on. It's nothing that's going to be present that's going to cause your kidneys to fail or other systemic problems that you look on the internet and you see all of these horrible things that they say are related to the actual vaccine.
That's awesome.
That's not the case.
That's awesome. So it's not a drug, not a chemical that stays in your body forever. It does what it does, and it's broken down and goes away. If I might make it so simple, am I making it too simple?
Nope.
Okay.
It is exactly as you described. It's something that's there and it goes away. Perfect. It is a synthetic blueprint that the body uses to make a protein. Mm-hmm. The protein is then destroyed, which is related to the COVID-19 virus. And those cells that destroyed it hang around to give you immunity.
All right. That's great. I appreciate that. That's blessing a lot of people tonight. And so let me go to Dr. Walker. Okay. So Dr. Walker, Dr. Pickens touched on this a little bit, but I want you to kind of touch on it a little bit more. So one of the questions of hesitancy or points of hesitancy is that we think that this vaccine was developed very quickly. Part of that narrative was shaped by the news, in politics, when it was kind of called Operation Warp Speed. Okay. And so we hear warp speed and it sounds like, my goodness, it's warp speed. We hear about coronavirus in, February of last year. By the end of the year, we all of a sudden have a vaccine for it. people don't really trust that because they think that it was developed in a couple of months. Is that true? Can you speak to how this vaccine appears to have appeared so quickly?
So I think earlier in my previous question, I mentioned SARS-CoV-2, which is where COVID-19 comes from. And all of you, I'm sure, have heard of SARS years ago. And so scientists had a jump on developing the COVID-19 vaccine using their experience from previous SARS and coronavirus efforts. And it's understandable that there have been some concerns about the safety of these first COVID-19 vaccines, just because we have been accustomed to hearing that vaccine development takes such a long process. But although the timeline was accelerated, no steps were skipped in the development of these vaccines and the integrity of the clinical trial process or the approval processes. They were able to fast track these vaccines because researchers used existing clinical trial networks like those that study HIV treatments and vaccines to quickly conduct the COVID-19 vaccine trials. And another critical piece was the investment in manufacturing, both by the US government and vaccine manufacturers, to scale up production and reduce the amount of time between the vaccine authorization and actually getting it into people's arms. So I want to emphasize again that the vaccines are being held to the same safety standards as other routine vaccines. Several expert and independent groups evaluate the safety of vaccines being given to people in the United States. And I believe both Dr. Bird and Dr. Turner touched on the fact that before any vaccines receive authorization or approval, the FDA carefully reviews all of the safety data from the clinical trials, and the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which is an independent committee of health experts, reviews all the safety data before recommending its use. And after the vaccines are authorized and in use, both the FDA and CDC continue to monitor the safety of the vaccine. So for those of you that have gotten the vaccine, you may have gotten some instructions on registering with a CDC program called Be Safe, where we are doing active daily monitoring for folks who may have some side effects or any other symptoms related to people's receipt of the vaccine. That is going to continue and be ongoing as more and more of these vaccines are distributed across the country.
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Walker. And so let me see if I can recap it just a bit. So though the vaccine appears to us to have been fast, okay, appeared quickly, what you said was that one, even though it might appear that way, the vaccine went through every single step that it's supposed to go through. No step was skipped. Okay, it went through all of the necessary processes in order to be approved. That was number one. Number two, you spoke about SARS. Okay, we've heard about SARS for years. Okay, and so SARS has been around, and so this COVID-19. Are you saying that it's kind of a strain of SARS? Is that kind of what I heard you say?
Absolutely. So it's in the SARS is coronaviruses, and it's in the family of coronaviruses.
Okay. So this idea of this coronavirus is not new. And I think I heard you say that, so the scientists, they had a kind of a jump on getting started with this vaccine. They weren't starting from scratch. Is that correct?
Correct. The only thing that is unique to this particular strain, COVID-19, is the year in which it was discovered, which was 2019. But coronaviruses have been around. The family of coronaviruses have been around for many, many years. And there are different varieties. COVID-19 happens to be a new strain that was that came on the scene in 2019, thus COVID-19.
Okay, I appreciate that. That I just wanted to make sure that was clarified for everyone. And I'm gonna turn to Dr. Turner. This is a virus question. Now, the nature of this question, I need to repeat that this is a virus question. This is not a vaccine question. We're gonna talk about what the virus does, not what the vaccine does, what the virus does. So again, this is a virus question. So Dr. Turner, tell us, for those of us who haven't had COVID-19, okay, what is it like to have COVID-19? What does COVID-19 do to the body physically? Because see, I might be hesitant to get the treatment because I don't really understand what having COVID is even like. So again, this is a virus question. Dr. Turner.
Good. The virus affects your body by entering through healthy cells. The virus can be spread airborne through direct contact or through droplets that can come from an affected person's cough, sneeze, or even breathing. The recipient can come in contact with the droplets in the air or on a surface as that they touch before touching one's eyes, nose, mouth. And that gives the virus a passage into the mucous membrane, such as in your throat. The virus then moves down your respiratory tract. The coronavirus has these little spikes. Y'all seen the cartoon drawings of them with the little spikes. Well, these spiky surfaces have proteins on them, on the receptors that attach onto your healthy cells within your respiratory tract, especially in your lungs. And your lower airways have more receptors for the virus that latches onto these proteins than the rest of your respiratory tract. So that's why your lower airways are more likely, that's why the virus is more likely to go deeper than, let's say, a common cold. Once in your body, the invader virus makes copies of itself. It replicates itself and multiplies throughout your body. The virus hijacks these cells and just takes command over your healthy cells. Eventually, it kills some of the healthy cells. As the virus replicates in your body, within 2 to 14 days, your immune system will start to respond. And the immune response is to have fever. You might have a cough, shortness of breath. Some experience body aches, headaches, sore throat, runny nose, loss of taste, smell, and it's even known to penetrate down into your GI tract, which can cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Your lungs might become inflamed, making it hard for you to breathe. So that's the most common process. This can lead to a pneumonia or an infection of the tiny airway sacs called the alveoli. That's inside your lung, where your blood exchanges the oxygen for carbon dioxide. However, most people with the symptoms just ends up with a cough and fever, and this is a minor case. More than 8 in 10 cases are mild with the cough and the fever. So that's why we're doing the fever checks. But for some, the infection can get much more severe. And these people, usually their symptoms go on for about 5 to 8 days after they, get the virus. And they start off with the shortness of breath, known as dyspnea. And eventually they can develop what we call an acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS, that can begin a few days later. These are the patients that usually end up on a ventilator and have a higher mortality rate. So your symptoms can vary on a range, with most of the symptoms being mild.
Okay, I appreciate that, Dr. Turner, because that gives us a good glimpse of what it is and what it does, how it even enters our system and our own life. And then what you pointed out, though, I had never known, because Dr. Pickens was talking about the spike protein and Dr. Bird was talking about the spike protein. And so that cartoon image that we see, the spikes that's the spike. Is that the spike protein? Is that what we're talking about? Okay. All right. See, I'm learning here. Okay. All right. Dr. Bird, let me come back to you. So we're back to a vaccine question. So when someone gets the vaccine, after they get the vaccine, like what should they do? What should their lifestyle be? Should they continue to wear a mask? Can we have family reunions again? You know, can I go out and eat in the restaurants without any worry or concern? What happens after we get the vaccine?
So that's a really good question, because, you know, most people think if I get the vaccine, I should be completely immune. And unfortunately, you know, that's probably not the case. So once you get the vaccine, first of all, you don't get the vaccine today, and then tomorrow you have immunity. Both of the vaccines that are available have 2 doses, either 3 or 4 weeks apart. And then you have a lag time of approximately 3 to 4 weeks after the second dose, where your immune system is ramping up the response to the virus and giving you the most antibody in your system. And so after you get the vaccine, number one, you still need to continue to wear your mask. We've all heard on TV of people that have gotten the come down with coronavirus a couple of days to a couple of weeks after having the vaccine. Those people were likely exposed during that time because people let down their guard. And unfortunately, your body has not built up enough immunity at that point that you got an exposure and didn't succumb to the disease. So you must still wear your mask. You do need to still socially distance. What's also true is that even when you get it, so say you get both doses, right? You get the dose now, you get another dose in 3 to 4 weeks. You wait 3 to 4 weeks after that to make sure that you have the maximum immunity. Because we don't know the specific immune response of each person, but they have been continuing to do the research. What they have found is that it is about 95% effective of preventing severe disease. And that means that if you have immunity at that point, after waiting about a month after the second dose of the vaccine, you are very unlikely to then come down with severe disease or need to be hospitalized and potentially be on a ventilator or potentially die. But we also don't know if some of those people still may have milder symptoms of the disease. They just don't have severe disease. So it's not a complete immunity. And when you think about complete immunity, what things do you think about people having complete immunity? Many times we think of chickenpox. So most people have a lifetime immunity against chickenpox. Most people get chickenpox one time and don't get it again, although some people do, but most people have lifetime immunity. But we don't have lifetime immunity against the flu, right? We get a new flu vaccine every single year. The flu season comes around, we get a new vaccine. This is kind of the same. Because it's a respiratory disease and a respiratory virus, it acts different than the other things that we think about. And so because of that, and because of the high mutation rate of the virus, there is the potential that your immunity is going to wane. And so what we found is you get immunity for a specific amount of time, but we don't know how long that immunity is going to remain in your system. And so we don't know if we're going to have 6 months of immunity and then we'll need to get vaccinated again. We don't know if this is going to be an annual thing that we'll have to get vaccinated each year. As time goes on, we're going to have to see that. And that's one of the main reasons you need to continue to socially distance. And the other main reason is, again, still, it protects you, really, most people, against severe illness. But you could very well still carry coronavirus and have the potential to spread it to someone else. You are just not likely to get sick and to be hospitalized or die if you've gotten immunity, if you've gotten the vaccine. And so that's why it's still important that once you get the vaccines, you get both doses, but you still continue to socially distance, wear your masks when you're around people that don't live in your household, make sure that you're washing your hands and surfaces on a regular basis. And again, because over time, your immunity is likely to wane. And so at some point you may not be immune again, and you won't know when that time is. And you don't want to risk yourself getting sick again because you thought, oh, I got my vaccine, I'm one and done. We don't know that yet. So even if you get your vaccine, you can probably be a little bit less cautious with your own family and your own settings. But when you're out with other people, when you're around people that you don't live with, we still would recommend that you socially distance and make sure that you're protecting yourself and your family, just because of the potential to still shed the virus asymptomatically. You're just not at risk to get, not as likely to get severe disease or to succumb to the illness if you get
Okay,
exposed.
so then let me throw this out there then, because I know this is a question that people have is, well, then how long we got to do this stuff? You know, I got the vaccine. How long am I going to really have to socially distance? How long am I going to have to do this mask thing? What would you say?
Unfortunately, Most medical professionals, and I'm sure Dr. Pickens, Dr. Turner can also tell you, unfortunately, we are likely going to be wearing masks for a fairly long period of time. I don't think that we're going to get to an answer quickly enough, because the problem is, as soon as the season changes again, you are going to have the virus, like the flu virus, to come around again. And unfortunately, if you don't wear masks, you are still going to have people get infected that are potentially at risk for severe disease. And so because of that, because some people just won't get vaccinated, right? Or some people won't have immunity. So those people still may succumb. For that reason, I think we are going to have some version of mask wearing for potentially a significant amount of time. And people in other countries, if you see China, if you see Asia, because they are so heavily populated, they actually have worn masks widely for a really long time. It's just not that in the US, but their population is much more dense. They have the most people in Asia than anywhere in the world. And so it's not as uncommon to them. And so it just may be something that we have to start getting used to in order to protect our family, friends, and strangers for that matter.
Well, I appreciate that. Dr. Pickens, let me turn to you real quick. Okay, so a question is, with Moderna and Pfizer, we know that those are the 2-dose vaccines, right? And people want to know, okay, so I get the first vaccine, the first shot, and then I go back and get the second shot. Are those shots different? I mean, are we getting the same 2 shots, or is there something different in that second shot?
Great question. There is no difference in the 2 shots. It is the same vaccine given in 2 different doses. The purpose of the second dose is to boost your immune response to a level that gives you more adequate protection against the virus when you do encounter it. You can think of it in the sense of, when you got the first dose, you may have made 5 cells that fight the infection. Extreme exaggeration. You get the second dose and you may have 500 cells that help fight the infection. Therefore, you have much stronger immunity. It is a boost.
So it's the booster shot that all of us kind of understood, you know.
It's essentially
you get a booster shot.
And much of it came from when the tests that were done to see the efficacy of the vaccines themselves. When they gave the first dose, when they went and tested whether or not it helped protect people against the actual virus, it was not quite at the level of efficacy that we wanted to see. Yeah. And so once they gave the second booster dose at the intervals that were given here, 21 days for the Pfizer vaccine and 28 days for the Moderna vaccine, the efficacy rose all the way up to that 95th or 95% level. That is why you get a second dose. It's not because we need to sell more vaccine, not because they want to sell 2 doses. It is only to make sure that you have, or the majority of people have, the number of cells to fight the infection when you actually encounter the COVID-19 virus.
Okay. All right, that's good. Booster. It's nothing different between first and second dose. The second dose just boosts. Okay. Yes. All right. Now, Dr. Walker, were you about to say something, Dr. Pickens? I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
Okay. So Dr. Pickens spoke about efficacy. Okay. And so we've heard about this 95% efficacy, that it's 95% effective. What, Dr. Walker, what does that mean? When we hear that, when the average person hears that it's 95% effective, we might think, well, I'm 95% protected from getting coronavirus, okay? And I just kind of walk around with that and think, I'm pretty good. 95%, that's really, really good. What does that mean? And I think Dr. Burt touched on this. If I get it, can I still get COVID-19?
So there are a couple of different terms that are being used. Sometimes they are used interchangeably, but let me start with efficacy, because vaccine efficacy refers to vaccine protection measured in randomized controlled trials usually under some specific conditions where a vaccine is stored and delivered and monitored. And so the efficacy that is being referred to with respect to these two vaccines is the 95% efficacy that occurred under a randomized clinical trial setting, which means that they are both highly effective in preventing severe disease. They prevent COVID by stimulating the body to produce protective antibodies, but it does not mean that 95% of people in the general population are protected from the disease with the vaccine, which is a misconception. However, vaccine effectiveness refers to vaccine protection measured in observational studies that include people who have been administered vaccines by healthcare providers under real world conditions. Anyone who has received the vaccine once it was approved, and we're looking at how well the vaccines protect people against COVID-19 in these real world settings. And we will have the data and information over time to determine the real world impact of vaccination and use it to inform decisions on vaccination going forward. Whether, I saw a question in the chat, whether we will need annual vaccination, whether we will need a booster vaccination due to the variants that we've all heard about, these other different types of strains of COVID-19. And so while we don't know how long immunity will last after vaccination, once we have more data on how well the COVID-19 vaccines are working in real life under real conditions that aren't as controlled, then we will have a better way to inform the public about what needs to be done going forward.
Okay.
And so that's another reason why we encourage folks to get the vaccine, so that we can have the data and information to determine how best to move forward with vaccination going forward, because we understand that it is likely that COVID-19 will be around for quite some time. And so what does that mean long term about vaccination and our ability to protect ourselves? And whether we're looking at natural immunity to the disease or vaccine induced immunity, we need to understand sort of the breadth of this work over the long haul.
I appreciate that, because we hear so much about it, and we hear, Johnson & Johnson is what, I don't know, was 75% or something like that efficacy in this, and then the others have 95% efficacy. So I appreciate you going into that and then corroborating what the others have said about, this virus isn't necessarily going to go anywhere anytime soon, and we need more and more people to get vaccinated so we can really understand what the long-term impact of the vaccine will be, and how it works, and whether or not we need a booster shot in a year, or however that goes. But it kind of sounds like to me that in order to get back to any semblance of what we thought was normal, we're going to need folks to get this vaccine. That's what it kind of sounds like. Would you guys agree with that?
I agree 100%.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Dr. Turner, let me turn to you. I got one more question for you, Dr. Turner. Okay. So this question came up from some people who've had COVID-19. And it's, if someone has already had COVID-19, should they still be vaccinated? Because we hear about antibodies and things. Is there a need for them to even be vaccinated? And if so, is there a period of time that the vaccination should take place? I think someone asked, or someone said that they heard that it should be 90 days after their last negative test. But really, what's that look like?
Yes, that's a great question. Dr. Bird kind of touched on this answer, but I'll go into it in more detail. Immunity can take place by vaccines or natural immunity, as Dr. Hurd alluded to. Like if you get, I don't know, the chicken pox, for example. If you get the chicken pox, you're immune to it. You don't need to get the vaccine. If you don't get the chickenpox, you need to get the vaccine. So this is more of a question of natural immunity. Natural immunity is the immunity someone gains from having an infection. So if you get COVID, do you get natural immunity? The answer is it's too early to tell. We don't know. This immunity right now varies from person to person. It is rare for someone who has had COVID to get infected again, but it can happen. It's also uncommon for people to have who get COVID to get it within 90 days once they have recovered from the first infection. However, there's still a lot that's not known, and especially a lot that's not known about natural immunity with the COVID virus. So we're still studying this part as people are getting it, and we're going into the long-term phases of how this disease acts. Experts do not know how long yet someone is protected from getting sick and after recovering from their COVID-19. Therefore, reinfection is still possible. According to the CDC, the vaccine is still recommended for all those who have had COVID due to the fact that reinfection with COVID is still possible. If you were tested for COVID-19, if you were treated, I'm sorry, with COVID-19 with monoclonal antibodies or convalescent plasma, so this is a certain type of treatment that they've used for COVID, then yes, you should wait 90 days before getting the vaccine. But everybody else, go ahead and get the vaccine according to the CDC. If you're unsure what your treatments were, you need to talk to your doctor and get an understanding. But according to the CDC, only those who have been treated with something called monoclonal antibodies or convalescent plasma should wait the 90 days before getting the COVID-19 vaccine.
That's good. I mean, that's good information. I mean, that's clear. I get that. So if, according to the CDC, if I've had COVID, I am subject to reinfection at some point in time. I am subject to that, and so according to CDC, I should get the vaccine. And unless I was treated with, you use very long words there, medical words. Unless I was treated with those specific treatments, I should get the vaccine. If I was treated with those specific things, wait 90 days, right? Now, what were those big terms?
Either monoclonal antibodies, so they're trying to, help rev up your immune system, or convalescent plasma. I'm no expert in the treatment of COVID, but those are the two treatments that they have used in patients with COVID-19 who have gone on to develop severe symptoms. So if you've received those treatments, you should wait 90 days before getting the vaccine. Otherwise, just getting the vaccine with mild symptoms and, what we call expectant treatment, where you just kind of, wait it out and see how you do, you can still get the vaccine. You should still get the vaccine.
Okay. All right. Dr. Walker, I have one last question for you. Now, this is a virus question. This is a virus question. And this virus question comes from someone who has studied and looked at CDC website and all this, okay? So the question is this, or the statement is this: I followed the CDC guidelines to safeguard myself from COVID-19, but I still got COVID-19. Can you speak to that? Why is that?
So there's a variety of reasons. CDC makes recommendations based on the most current scientific evidence. This was a new strain, and early onset of the pandemic, there were a lot of things that we didn't know, a lot of unknowns. And some policies and recommendations have changed over the course of the pandemic as our scientific understanding of the virus that causes COVID-19 and how it is transmitted has evolved. And so in order for these guidelines and tools such as vaccination are here to protect us, we need to collectively do our part to reduce the spread and give the virus less opportunity to mutate. COVID doesn't just spread in public places, it can spread at home too, particularly if you are in inviting people who don't live in your household, or if members of your household are in areas with high degrees of exposure. So the faster we vaccinate, the more we mask up, and less time that we spend indoors with people not from our household, the fewer of our neighbors, friends, and relatives will be killed by COVID. And as always, CDC encourages people to follow our guidance, but it does allow for some flexibility, and we don't want our guidelines or guidance to be so rigid that it creates unintended barriers.
Yeah.
And so, even if you follow the guidelines and you still got COVID 19, you should continue to follow the guidelines, because whether you got it, you may have protected someone else from not getting the virus.
Good. That's
So
good.
it's not
That's
just
good.
about protection for yourself; it's protection for others as well.
That's good. That's good. I like that. That's a good answer. Okay, so we're about done here because we want to respect everyone's time. But I have this final question for the four of you. Okay, and be as succinct as you possibly can with this question. And we'll start with Dr. Bird. But it's the same question for all of you. What does taking the vaccine do for me, my family, and the world?
It protects you. I just tell people we don't have enough to treat and cure this disease, and you don't know if you're going to be the person that succumbs to the disease. You just don't know. So why take the chance? If you ask all of the physicians, I'm sure all of us on this call have gotten our vaccines. All of our family members, our colleagues, take the vaccine. We don't have anything else right now. And this disease is so highly communicable. It can transmit so easily and so rapidly. That's the problem. It's faster than we are at trying to catch it. So we don't have anything else. Get in line to get the vaccine.
Dr. Pickens, what does taking the vaccine do for me, my family, and the world?
Well, it reduces the risk of infection to you, your loved ones, and your community. It provides a means to reduce the replication of this virus. This is a virus that at its height killed 2,000 to 3,000 people per day in the US alone. That number right there is staggering in terms of how dangerous this virus really is. So if you can't do anything to protect yourself or your health other than taking a vaccine, you should want to do that. I mean, there are a lot of health conscious people that will take far more dangerous things to improve their health, but they won't take a simple vaccine, which is going to reduce their chances of dying. I don't understand a lot of the hesitancy that I see in people that know the facts. I understand when people don't know the facts, but when you have access to the facts and you know the facts and you still decide not to do something to help not only yourself, but those that are around you, it becomes a little perplexing.
Appreciate it. Dr. Turner, what does it do for me, my family, and the world?
Well, one thing that we haven't really talked about is our mental health during this crisis. For me personally, working in a hospital where I'm around COVID-19 patients, it ensures me, it gives me a peace of mind, first of all, that I can, have a chance to not be one of the people that have succumbed to this disease. There are healthcare workers that have died. There are people that, when the vaccine first came out, it was thought to be for a vaccine or a virus when the virus first came out, it was thought to be a virus that affected older people. But when people my age and younger started to die from this, it became real. So I'm not ready to go. So it gave me a peace of mind. It gave me a chance to be around my family without having the guilt of spreading the virus to them. So when I first, before taking the vaccine, I did not want to put my mother, who is elderly, my aunts who are elderly, and my grandmother, who's over 100, at risk. And now I feel more comfortable being around my family. And that for me is mental health. That helps me to become more engaged with my family and with my friends. And once the world becomes more engaged, we can get back to being where we were, and we can get our mental health back, as well as, protecting our physical health. So I'm ready to get, back socially with the congregation, with my family and friends. And that's why this vaccine is so important. We can speed up this process if everybody gets vaccinated.
Amen. Peace of mind. Peace of mind. To Camille or Tiffany, Dr. Pickens, he had dropped out. I think he's needing to get back into this. And last, Dr. Walker. So what does taking the vaccine do for me, my family, and the world?
So, as we talked about, Black people in the U.S. are dying from COVID at 2 to 3 times the rate of others, but getting vaccinated at half the rate. And this is unacceptable. We need to help to address these inequities. And getting vaccinated means you're at much less risk of getting severely ill from COVID yourself. And this pandemic has also shown how our fates are tied to one another. Whatever affects one person can affect all of us. That's why it's important that we all work together to stop the spread and protect our communities. And we need to use the tools that are available to us. I know there are many people who are hesitant about vaccination in general, but I'll share that I have been in Ghana, West Africa, for the last 4 years, supporting work around outbreak response and infectious disease. And many sort of older folks have heard of polio. And we know that polio has been eradicated, at least in the United States and other Western countries, for years. However, over the last couple of years, Ghana and many other countries in Africa have experienced polio outbreaks. And so that's just a clear sign that vaccination works if you have access to it. And we need to take advantage of these tools and resources that are available to us, because there are many other people around the world, around the globe, who don't have access and who don't have the advantages and ability that we have to access some of these tools and resources to protect ourselves and our communities.
I appreciate that. I appreciate all of you for giving the answer, to that, because, ultimately we all want to kind of get back to fellowship and one with another. We want to get back to in-person fellowship, in-person services. And I don't know about where everyone is, but here at the Church of Christ at Bouldercrest, we've been kind of in congregational exile since last March. God has blessed us. He's blessed us immensely. But we still want to see one another. We want to hug, and we want to be able to praise God in the same physical space. And I'm listening to this tonight, and it just sounds like this is something we need to do. We're not twisting anybody's arm. We're not trying to tell you, what to do. But it sounds like to me the risks of not getting it are severely outweigh the risks, any risk that might be out there of getting it. Would you guys agree with that? All right.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
I appreciate it. Well, there are other people probably with a lot of other questions. Now, my guess is, doctors, that if people have questions that we didn't necessarily cover tonight, my guess is you would say to them, talk to your primary care physician, have an honest conversation with them, and get your questions out there and listen to them. Because obviously, if you have a primary care physician and you've had them for some period of time, my guess is you've built up a level of trust with them. So talk with them. Am I on base with that? doctors?
Yes, very much so. And if they are going to use the internet and other sources, it needs to be credible, scientific, proven information, not hearsay or things that are just forwarded on social media. It really needs to be validated, factual information.
Good, good, excellent. I appreciate that. And remember, VSC has set up a wonderful resource page where these doctors have contributed some wonderful resources, so you can check that out in your own time. But in closing, I want to thank you all, Doctors Walker and Turner and Pickens and Bird, for being part of this medical roundtable. I want to thank you all who have participated in it and watching this, and prayerfully you walk away from this with a little bit more peace of mind. We're thankful to our nurse practitioner, Dawn Ledford, who manned the Q&A. And let's just move forward with these facts, continue to have faith in God, and just continue to walk with him. But we've heard from our brothers and sisters tonight. And in closing, I want to turn it back over to Roxy for any closing statements. And then she'll kick it back to me, and then we'll have a closing prayer for tonight.
All right. Thank you, Brother Marcus. Thank you all for your patience on tonight. We went a little further. We only had about 12 or 13 or so more minutes to go at the hour that we would normally stop. I want to thank you once again. It is my sincere prayer that you have received an immense amount of information that has answered your questions. I have 5 sheets of notes. This was very informative, very informative. So you can not only make intelligent decisions for yourself, because it's all about you and God and your decision, but also so you can give intelligent information to others. Marcus will make this available on our platforms. Also, it's on the Church of Christ at Bouldercrest. It's on their Facebook page as well. If you go to that Facebook page and go under their videos and scroll down, this same presentation is on that page. When you're talking to people and they are negative, or if you can tell they're really not informed, don't argue with them. Point them to this information and let the professionals speak to them. But you should be able to speak intelligently. If you took notes, as I have done the last 2 weeks, you should be able to speak intelligently concerning this. As I said, there's a sermon I did a few weeks ago entitled God's Vaccine. And some of this information about the mRNA was in that information as well. But God bless you. May he keep you. Sister Miles, do you have any announcements?